Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to episode 14. So I guess you could say that this episode I was divinely guided to do. It was 100% off the cuff, no script, nothing. I just did it. And the reason why I decided to do this topic today is because this week is the official closing of my acupuncture practice. After 12 years of having a brick and mortar business, I am closing it effective August 14th of 2020. So I was just noticing that as I was going through this process of closing and gradually going into the online space, I got a lot of just curious questions from people and some raised eyebrows, and maybe that's just my interpretation, but I wanted to go into that a little bit, but I really wanted to go into the deeper aspect of making a decision when it comes to something that is coming from your higher self versus when it's coming from your ego. And I'm using my experience and process of having the business for 12 years to demonstrate sort of the pitfalls and the mistakes that I made versus when I made decisions that were based on my higher self and for the greater good of humanity. So it's a little longer than normal. I can't believe I spoke for this long, but I hope you enjoy it. If it feels a little different compared to other episodes, it's because it is. I just kind of turned my microphone on and talked, and this is what you got. I hope for those of you that are listening, you get some value out of it. And I hope that you enjoy it. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Empowered Warrior Podcast. My name is Angela Noel, and I am an intuitive coach, acupuncturist, and Chinese herbalist. This podcast is all about empowerment, meaning how you can maintain your personal power in order to have the best life beyond your imagination. An empowered warrior is someone who has the identity of a person who is healthy, radiant, and free from all suffering, and has the tools ready and available to move through life's obstacles with confidence, ease, and a sense of freedom. In this podcast, I bring over 16 years experience in Chinese medicine, countless years of self-development, and a passion for helping others find their personal power. I will be discussing just a few of my favorite topics regarding health from a Chinese medicine perspective, brain habits, and spirituality, so that you can quickly pave your pathway to freedom and be free from the chains that have kept you stuck. My intention with this podcast is to serve as a guide for warriors who want to form a healthy foundation of body, mind, and spirit, and sustain it by changing who they are being from the inside and having a stronger connection to their higher selves. My goal is to help students end the unnecessary suffering that they place on themselves by having poor health habits, negative thought loops, and a lack of self-worth. I am so happy that you're here. Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to episode 14. And I just want to, as always, express my gratitude for you listening to the podcast, for being a follower, whether you just started following or you've been following since I started, which has not been that long. It's going to be close to 3 months at the end of August. But I'm just very grateful, and I want to express that to you because my purpose in life is to get this kind of messaging out, to encourage people to grow by changing who they are being from the inside, or becoming more aware of how they think so that they can shift and grow and evolve into another way of being in order for them to have the life, the business, the relationships, and the money that they dream of, that you dream of, that we all want at a very, very deep level. We all want these things. And as humans, we're really, really good at getting in our own way, right? It's easy to see that. It's easy to see how that happens, is it not? I just feel like it's very noticeable. It always has been really noticeable. I see it in myself. I see it in the people that I love. I see it in the way that people act and treat each other. You know, when you think about somebody who truly loves themselves, somebody who truly values themselves, somebody that has a really high sense of self-worth, would not be going around treating other people the way that so many of us are witnessing people being treated right now. And that's just one example. And I am very committed to being a part of showing people that there is, in fact, another way of thinking, that we are truly so powerful and we don't even realize it. We don't even realize our true potential. And as I record this and as I talk today, I'm kind of self-monitoring myself and noticing what I'm saying. And in some ways I'm thinking, Angela, this sounds so cliche, but really repetition is the mother of all learning. And I don't think there can be too many times where we can hear these very important lessons. And that is, warriors, that we are all so powerful, that we are capable of doing whatever it is that we want in our lifetime. And it just requires the willingness of letting go of old paradigms, of old stories, of old thought processes, of old ways of thinking as we view them as what is true, right? But what I'm starting to really realize is that what is ultimate truth? What is ultimate truth? And in my interpretation, ultimate truth and ultimate reality is whatever we want that to be. Whatever we want that to be. Now, you know, when you go into like 3D reality and our day-to-day lives, it is in fact true that there are things that are true and that there are things that are false, right? There are things that are right and things that are wrong. I do not dispute that whatsoever. But what I'm talking about, warriors, is stepping into this deeper consciousness that is all part of us, because the world is mental and the world is consciousness. And when you start to realize that, when you begin to realize that, that is when the magic really happens. And if this sounds cryptic in any way, trust me, warriors, I just invite you to listen to these words. Maybe if you're driving or you're listening to this while you're doing something else, that you maybe listen to it at a different time, and another time where you can sit in quiet reflection and take notes and journal on these words. Because what you're going to find out, and what many people realize after they do this kind of work on themselves, is that we are all connected through our consciousness, through our energy, and as a result, we can decide our reality. And I know it sounds, for some people that have been living in this very masculine, very patriarchal, like so many of us have, society, where we feel like we need to wait for permission to, especially as women, but human beings in general. I don't think this is just a female or a male problem. This is a human, and I'm reluctant to say problem, but a human evolution issue where we feel like we need to ask for permission. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, if you subscribe to my newsletters, or if you follow me on social media, you've probably heard me talk about this a lot, that life is choice, and we do have the ability to decide whatever it is that we want to do. And what I'm hearing from so many people lately, from followers, from friends, from acquaintances, from people in my community, is that it feels really heavy right now with all the choices that we need to make. So whether you're parenting and you have to decide where you're going to send your kids to school, or how school is going to look, or whether it be a job situation, how are you adapting to having to work from home and waiting for this vaccination that's supposedly going to bring us back into our next level of normal. I want to remind you that, and I think I don't remember how it was worded, but it was worded so beautifully. I saw somebody post something about all these decisions and what I'm talking about. And they said, well, prior to lockdown, prior to COVID, so many of these things that we look at as problems, so many of these things that we look at as potential barriers to our happiness, is just another thing that we need to deal with. Whereas before, it would be considered a quote unquote nightmare, right? Oh, this is a nightmare. Like, all these things are going wrong. And for those of us that are perfectionists, right? I'm definitely a perfectionist. So many of us are perfectionists, and it comes in so many different shapes and sizes, or we're planners, right? This feels like a big infringement or a violation to what we used to know and how our life used to look. And I just want to invite you into this being an opportunity to look at things differently, because things are very, very different. And how beautiful is that, right? How beautiful is that? Now, I'm going to be fully transparent. You may or may not know, I do not have children, but I can totally see where so many people are right now. And I just want to invite you to consider that maybe, just maybe, this is an opportunity for you to fully surrender and figure out what is best for my family, what is best for my kids. Were they happy before? Was I happy before? And maybe this is just another opportunity to look at things differently. Maybe I can look at homeschooling or unschooling. And trust me, this episode is not about sending kids back to school, but I'm using this as an example of the possibilities that are out there. And with today's podcast, it just feels very relevant to share this with you today, because of so many people out there facing the issue of what feels like major decision making. Am I right? It just feels like the decisions are never ending. And what I want to do is just share my process of what's been going on with me in hopes that it will somehow inspire you into your next level. Because you may or may not know this, but I truly believe that all of this stuff that feels tumultuous at times, that feels chaotic at times, I have always believed, well, maybe not always, but I probably for the last 4 years, I have believed. I was given the gift of some knowledge from a higher part of myself, from a shaman, that all of this is happening because human beings have been asleep. And it could look at it that way, that we've been asleep. You could look at it like as a negative thing, but we were just where we were at because that was our normal, right? That was what was just considered to be like, this is what people do. And now all this change and all this shifting and all these new decisions that we need to make and all this stuff that just feels hard sometimes is only happening because we are luminous and bright and have the ability to transcend our old way of being into this new way of being. And what is that going to look like for you guys, warriors? What is that going to look like for you guys? Whether it's schooling or whether it's, hey, I'm sick and tired of this job. Like, I want to quit. How does that feel? I want to start that business that I've always wanted. I want to close my clinic so that I can work full-time online and do what truly fills my cup. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of my process of being a clinic owner, of having a brick and mortar space for 12 years. And this week I'm moving out of my acupuncture office. And I'm not going to be practicing acupuncture as I used to anymore. Now, I'm kind of not a fan of saying that things are finite and ever again. I'm never going to practice ever again. But at this point in my life, what is calling to me right now, what is calling to me in my very being is that I do this. And I want to just go back to, the time that I was in school and tell you a little bit about my journey. Because I do think that our subconscious or our intuition, our souls talk to us nonstop. Whether it be from dreams that we have, to conversations that we have, to something that we read that feels interesting. There are these little nudges that we get every single day. And oftentimes, I don't think that we are fully aware of all of them. But we get this information from our soul constantly. We get downloads constantly. And it could feel like something really minor, like, oh, no big deal. Like I ran into Susie today at the store and she said something about, oh, I always imagined you being a total online entrepreneur or something like that. Okay, I'm just using examples. So that's what I want to talk about today. And there's no script. There's no anything. It just feels very strong for me to get on the microphone and talk. So I could very well divert and go into somewhere else somewhere else. But my intended episode for today is to talk to you about the end of an era, the end of my acupuncture practice, after 12 years, after so many years of being wrapped up in this, in a very good way, wrapped up in this identity of an acupuncturist, even though I did receive hints from my soul many, many times that something about it didn't feel right. And how I dealt with it, how I went through it, and I'm going to try to not talk too long, but I don't know. This is all just being channeled and coming through me right now. So we'll see how it goes, okay? So, my decision to start becoming an acupuncturist happened, like so many people talk about. I feel like this happened it wasn't my plan, first of all, to go to acupuncture school. I was aware that there was a school in my town, or close to Boston. I was living in outside of Boston. But it always seemed so far-fetched, like, oh my God, like I would look at the tuition and think, oh, how does one afford something like that? And, my mindset at the time was very, very, I was in my early 30s. I was in between is the best way I can describe it. I used to live out in Colorado in the mountains where I was just, I often refer to that part of my life as being probably, I think all parts of our life is important, but when it comes to just feeling like I'm home, feeling like I'm in a place of belonging, those 4 years of living in Colorado was that for me. And it wouldn't surprise me, my husband and I are in conversation right now about where to hang our hat next after we leave Massachusetts, or at least our town that we live in Massachusetts. And it wouldn't surprise me if we wind up somewhere like Colorado again, or somewhere that values Mother Earth, that values the outdoors, where people are maybe a little more laid back. And, I feel like I fit in wherever I go, right? At this point, I've let go of what other people think about me, how people view me, but I don't know. When you hear people talking about going somewhere and they feel like they've reached home. Anyway, so I lived in Colorado. I moved back east in late 2001 after the attacks of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon of September 11th, 2001. And I knew I just needed to be close to home. And I needed to be close to my family for a while. I was working as in lots of restaurants when I lived in Colorado. I had a ski bum life and I loved it, but I missed birthdays and I missed holidays, and it was just really starting to get to me. So anyway, my values, I just became aware of my values, and I came home. And I decided, I'm from upstate New York, but I decided to move to Boston because there was something about Boston that was pulling me in. And I had some friends from college offer me a place to live in Cambridge in their apartment. And that's sort of how I came to Boston. And eventually, several years later, I decided, in fact, to go to acupuncture school. So I went to acupuncture school as a result of getting acupuncture myself. I was working in the restaurant business, working in the industry. And if you've been in the industry, working in restaurants, it's a lot of late nights. It's a lot of carrying of heavy things, big trays, big dishes I worked at, many, many different kinds of places. But, talking about being hard on your kidney chi, the late nights of working in the restaurant business, of being up too late, carrying heavy things, it affected my lower back, and low back is it's associated with the kidney channel, right? And the kidney channel is like our body's anchor, right? It's the part of us that naturally declines no matter what. It naturally declines with age. So once it's gone, the way we learn in acupuncture school, it's gone, kidney chi. However, there are lifestyle strategies that can, keep it going, can prevent us from totally wiping out our kidney chi. And one of the things, that's really good for kidney chi is to avoid overwork and late nights and exerting ourselves unnecessarily. Does that sound familiar? That sounds like a very societal trait, right? So many of us are overworking and staying up too late and not sleeping and all this stuff, and that just wipes out our kidney chi. So here I was working restaurants. I was working Cape Cod restaurants, and I was working in Boston restaurants and Cambridge restaurants, and I was looking for my next move. And I decided to go to acupuncture school after I started getting treated for my low back pain working in restaurants. And it was one of those things. Like, I thought I was actually planning on going back to school for massage therapy. I knew I wanted to do something in wellness. And then I got acupuncture and I was sold. And that's how that happened. That's how I became an acupuncturist. And everything kind of fell into place after making that decision. And I feel like I'm sharing this with you guys because I feel like it was probably the first time, maybe not the first time, but it was one of the first times I feel like I really made a decision on my own where I wasn't asking, for anybody's permission. I knew I wanted this. People were asking me what this was all about. And I ignored all the naysayers and I just went ahead and did it. So anyway, I went to school. I often talk about how going to acupuncture school was like learning an entirely different language, because we had to learn these things that we don't talk about, in everyday conversation. Qi and kidney yin and kidney yang and heart and liver and all this stuff, right? That's not part of normal conversation. We just don't talk about that. And I loved it. But as it was getting close for me to graduate and decide on what I wanted to focus on, one thing that really felt strong was to focus on emotional, kind of the spiritual, emotional aspect of the person. I was really into that. And one of the teachers that really resonated with me at the time was this guy named Jeffrey Yuen. And I went to some of his continuing ed classes and I just loved it. I soaked it up. But I graduated and I opened up my practice. And I had a friend that owned a building in Boston. He actually was a member of the country club that I used to work at on the Cape. And he told me, he said, when you are ready, when you graduate and you're ready for your office, just get in touch with me. I think Copley Square would be a great spot for you. And what did I do? I graduated. I opened up a practice in Copley Square in my friend's building. And I opened up a practice without having really any connections in the area. I had a couple of connections. And I started it from scratch. And I just went ahead and freaking did it, And it took a while to build. But One thing I have to say is that I would never, ever take away from that part of my life, you know? These are the things that build us and make us strong. So I had my practice in Copley Square for 10 years. There was a period of about 3 years where after the Boston bombings, my office in Copley was really, really close to the finish line of the Boston Marathon. And I just felt really called to move for a while and get away from that part of town, going through some personal things of my own. So I found an office in the South End, which was just a couple blocks away from Copley. And I was in the South End for 3 of those years. I had a really good practice. I had a really good, amazing practice, and I had connections to many people. Pretty busy practice. And I think, as I mentioned before, one of the things that I wanted to do and focus on when I had my practice was the spiritual, emotional aspect of people, of my patients. And what happened when I started practicing was I kind of got sucked into what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And I kept getting a lot of information based on the people that were showing up that fertility was the way to go. So I started doing a lot of fertility work. And what I realized is that, it kept me busy. It paid the bills. I had a lot of patients. I probably had an 85 to 90% fertility practice when I was in Boston. But here's the thing. I didn't love it. So now that I look back and think about, there's a few things that I would pay more attention to when I was making a big decision. And I just want to share that with you all, because if you are starting a business, whether it's brick or mortar or online, it's really easy to want to ask other people what you should do. Because in theory, you don't know, because you've never done it before. And what I want to invite you to do today is to take the I don't know out of your vocabulary altogether. Because you do know. You do know. And I'm going to share a secret with you. And if I'm hopping around or if it feels incongruent at all to be listening to me right now, my invitation is just to stay with me. Again, maybe listen to this when you're not driving and just take it in, because I am divinely guiding you right now. I do not know what's going to come out of my mouth from one second to the next. So when I had my acupuncture practice, and the reason why I'm going into such detail about this is there was part of me that knew it wasn't a good idea to open up the office in Copley Square. And I did it anyway because I was asking somebody. I had a friend with an office building. And even though, yes, there was a lot of abundance and there were a lot of good things that happened as a result, and I would never, ever trade it in a million years, because life is learning. Life is the lessons that we take from it. But I feel like entrepreneurs so oftentimes are tempted by the whole, I need to get my mentor and I need to get my people to tell me what to do because I've never done this before. And I want to invite you right now from this day forward to stop saying that you don't know what you're doing, that you don't know. Because you do. Your soul knows. Now, I don't want to take away from the fact that mentors are important and people that are teachers and coaches. And I talked about this in episode 13, so I don't want to repeat myself. If you have any questions, just go back to that one and listen. But I truly believe that we have all the knowledge we need, and having mentors around is important to kind of fill in the gaps. Or maybe there's something that we legitimately had no idea, right? Like I remember sitting down with somebody from, what is it called? The Small Business Administration. I think they're like a nonprofit organization. They're all over the country. And I met with one of those gentlemen. They take on volunteers. They're usually retired, and they help people. They help new business owners or business owners with processes that they don't know anything about. Like when I started my LLC, I could have like spent hours and hours and hours like looking things up online to figure out how to do it. But I just had a call with somebody from SBA and they helped me, and I saved a lot of time. So let's not take away from that kind of help, right? But what I'm talking about is oftentimes warriors, we just sell ourselves short and we sell out because we think that what we're doing isn't the right decision. And what we're doing is the wrong decision, or we should be doing something else because everybody else is doing it this way. And what I want to tell you is that there is only one you, right? There's only one you. So just because a majority of, and I work with a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, right? A lot of practitioners who kind of want to work on their self-worth and gain abundance. So a lot of times it's really tempting to just follow the crowd and listen to other people. What I would invite you to do is to really step into that inner knowledge that is only available for you, that only you know, that is only appropriate for you and not other people. Because that's when the richness happens. That's when the abundance happens. That's when the prosperity happens. That's when you truly are in service to your people, because you are helping them in a unique way that no one else on this planet Earth can do except for you. And these clients are going to come to you because they are energetically attracted to what you are putting out there. So if you are putting out your truest, most aligning energy, your most high vibe self, those are the people that are going to be attracted to and find you and who are going to want to work with you. These are the people that can't wait to sign up with you. These are the people that when you close effortlessly because it's easy and it feels good. And they are ready for the transformation and change, and they are not tire kicking because they want this so bad. So does that make sense? Are you starting to see what is possible for you? Endless, endless possibilities. So getting back to the acupuncture practice, as you probably know at this point, I was in practice for 12 years. In 2017, I was just getting, I don't know, you could probably talk to a handful of my friends, and they will tell you that probably every 2 to 3 years I would get itchy and I would want to close my practice down. Either because I wanted to have a practice that was in my town and not have to commute to Boston anymore, or I just was feeling like I would listen to these podcasts on my commute to work. And oftentimes they were online entrepreneurs that had blogs, or they were in the health and wellness industry or fitness industry. I was just really, really intrigued by these people. Coaches, right? Like, I remember when I found Chalene Johnson and I was blown away by her. She was doing this 14-day challenge, right? I think it was to help with consistency and showing up and doing the things that you needed to do on your to-do list. And I loved her. I was just blown away by her, and I wanted whatever it was that she had. And it never really made a lot of sense. I feel like I dipped into social media really early, even though a lot of my acupuncture colleagues were saying, social media isn't really appropriate for clinicians, which is kind of a bunch of BS, right? We know that. But it just felt very alive for me to follow these people, but I didn't really know why. because I was the farthest. What I was doing as an acupuncturist and herbalist in my physical space was nothing like the people I was listening to online. So, looking back, I truly believe that I probably could have easily closed the practice down 5 to 7 years earlier than I did, or even sooner than that. But I was so wrapped up in this identity of being an acupuncturist and having this practice, and the fact that I had this practice in a very, very nice area. Copley Square, for the most part, is pretty nice. Nighttime, it becomes a little bit of a different animal, but it's a nice area of Boston. And I had this identity. Why would I leave? I had patients that really seemed to enjoy coming. Why would I leave? I worked with professional athletes, and I had these opportunities that maybe other people didn't as an acupuncturist because of where I worked. There was always a traveling theater show, right? The traveling Broadway shows. And these actors would sometimes come in and want a treatment. I just found all that very exciting. And I think what it was is that my ego was too involved, and my soul sort of was just pushed aside. My higher self was pushed aside so that my ego could do her thing, so that I could stay in my comfort zone, so I could stay safe, so I could continue to maybe complain about my commute and just live a mediocre life, but not a life of joy and peace and everything that's associated with working from that person that works from her higher self. Does that make sense? So in 2017, I think it was 2017. It's the years are starting to get all mismatch, but it was either the end of 2016 or the end of 2017. I said, enough is enough. I am hiring a professional. I am working with a coach. And when the right person comes along, I am going to work with her or him. And sure enough, within a couple of months of making that declaration, be careful what you ask for, right? So what you say out loud, what you think, what you say, all those things, right, have vibration and energy to them, warriors. So when you start saying things like, oh, I'm going to get diabetes just like my mom does, just be careful, okay? The universe is listening. So my coach showed up. Like 2 or 3 months after I made that declaration. I wrote it down in one of my journals, and she showed up, and I had this incredible high-end business coach, somebody who I knew personally. I trusted her. I went all in, and I worked with this woman for 2 years or so. And within 3 weeks of working with her, so it was November, I want to say it was November 2016. I had decided that by the end of 2016, so it was just a few short weeks away, that I would close my Boston practice. And I did it pretty fast because I knew that's what I wanted. And my coach just knew what questions to ask to guide me into that place. And I did it. And it was beautiful. I closed my Boston practice within a couple weeks of working with my coach, and I had a second office already closer to home in my town where I live in Massachusetts, and I just worked out of that office solely. And I did that for 3 years. And I like to look at having the local practice as just sort of my winding down, my launch pad, because I was close to home now. I had the time to really put into my online coaching business, because as a result of working with my coach, I decided that I wanted to work online. which wasn't a big surprise. I knew that's what I wanted. I knew that's what my soul wanted. And so I did that. I worked on that. And it was becoming more and more clear and more obvious that this was my dharma, to work with people online, to work as a coach with people online. And so here is sort of what I wanted to address that feels very important, because I feel like this is when people get tripped up. This is when I got tripped up in Boston, is when people would say stuff like, why would you ever close this Boston office? You have an amazing client following here. You have a great location. You have patients who love you. You have all these people, right? All these things. And that's when, even though I would, from my heart and soul, I knew it was time to move on, even years ago, I didn't do it because I was listening to these people telling me these things that were true. I had all these gifts. I had all this abundance. But what if, warriors, what if you ignore those other voices, even though they're well-meaning, and you really tune in to your higher self and what she wants or what he wants, and ask, I know this is uncomfortable. Is this the right thing for me? What is the right thing for me? Is it to walk away? And for those of you, and you may or may not know at this point, that kind of my jam and what I love to do is to help people that are in this spot, right? Whether you want to go from bricks and mortar to online, the online space, or you just want to ramp up your revenue, or you want just to have more of a connection to what you're doing, to your higher self, because you know that there's some kind of thing that's out of alignment, and what's getting in the way between you and you having that is a self-worth issue, right? Like not believing in yourself, not trusting yourself, not feeling like you deserve this, that life is pretty good right now. Why would I change anything? I have so many blessings. Like I have more than what other people have. Why would I want to go for more? Why would I want more? So it doesn't matter, warriors, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, or if you're making, enough with some leftover, like you can go on some nice vacations every year, or you might be low 7 figures. I don't know where you're at. I don't know where my listeners are at. I'm guessing they're all over. They're all over the place. But you are capable of infinite potential. So if you have a low 6-figure business and you want a 7-figure business, you can have that. If you have a 7-figure business and you want a mid 7 or 8-figure business or 9-figure business, you can have that. The problem is that when you try to go from the place that you are now to the place where you want to be, the pitfall that many of us get involved in is that we try to get to that point B from our point A state. So back in the day when I was trying to set up my coaching practice and I was having a hard time letting go of the acupuncture practice, this is after I closed Boston and I was just sort of hanging out in my local practice, I was trying to get to my point B from my point A, and it just wasn't working. My point A was somebody that wasn't quite there with believing in herself and trusting herself and knowing that she deserved these things and wanted to end the hard and the struggle and wanted to have more time with her husband, her family, wanted to have more freedom. But that wasn't where I was working from. I was working from this place of lack and the shoulds and the shame and the guilt and all this stuff that really doesn't mean anything. It's just made up. in our head. So where do you see yourself? Now, for those of you that, you want more. I mean, if you are still listening to this podcast, I've been talking now for like 47 minutes straight. If you're listening, the fact that you are listening to this podcast for this long, and you're still intrigued and you want more and you're just curious, must mean that you want more in your life. All of those things I mentioned before, the freedom, the more time spent with your family, your kids, less time spending working all the time. So, if you continue to work from this point A to try to get the changes that you want in your life, to get to the point B, if you're unwilling to hire the right coach or pay for the course, right, to get that kind of that edge to help you kind of get out of your comfort zone, where are you going to be in another year if you continue down this path? Where are you going to be in another 3 years, 5 years? For me, I spent too much time doing fertility when I didn't really enjoy it. I spent too much time commuting to Boston when I didn't really want to do it. I was getting the calling to do something else, and I ignored the calling because I didn't believe in myself, because I didn't have the self-worth, because I thought that if I closed my Boston practice, I would go broke. I mean, all these ridiculous stories we tell ourselves, people. Warriors. You are a warrior. And the fact that you're listening to this tells me that you want more. That you want more. So, my office closes next week, or actually later this week, and I had a few people approach me and ask me, why are you doing this? Some were colleagues of mine, fellow acupuncturists. Some were patients, some were friends, some were family members. Why are you just shutting it all down? And I think I explained all of that in this episode, why I'm shutting it all down. Because sometimes you need to shut it all down. You need to erase everything and start with a clean slate so that you can really, really go inward and figure out how you are going to help other people so that you can have the life that you want, the business that you want. Sometimes it involves burning it down and starting all over again. And for those of you that are just listening and wondering, well, how the heck do I do this? What is that confusion costing you by you choosing to be in this state of confusion and this lack of clarity? What is it costing you to be in this state? The state of, so many times we get an overwhelm. Oh, I'm so overwhelmed. What does that do? It's an illusion, warriors. It's an illusion. It's the ego's way of keeping us safe or stuck so that we don't need to do those hard things that are not really that hard. It's just what our soul wants. But oftentimes it can be met with confusion from others. Like I had the confusion from others. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that when you have things that are so good where you're at? Why would you want more when you have all this? Why would you give it all? Why would you throw it all away? Because you are a warrior and you know that you want more. You deserve more. And simply by working from your point B, by deciding and choosing who you are being on the inside, and remaining committed and in integrity to that point B person, to your higher self, you are going to have what you truly want out of life. And for those of you that are kind of stuck because of this whole COVID crisis, oh, I can't do anything because of COVID. Let me just tell you something. I'm connected to a lot of people, a lot of successful people. I work with really successful people. I'm in masterminds and courses with very successful entrepreneurs. I'm seeing people out there, entrepreneurs, have $300 launches, 7-figure years, and this is all in 2020. And let me just say, even though I know there's a lot of people out there that get uncomfortable about this talk about money, it's uncomfortable to talk about money because that's the culture that we come from. Oh, it's not appropriate to talk about money and dollars and cents. Listen, you need to get comfortable talking about the money because it is the money that is going to help other people. By you being rich, by you being abundant, by you having the 7-figure, the 8-figure business, by raising your vibration so that you attract these things back at you, so that you are working from your best self, you are able to attract those people back to you that you can help. And that, warriors, is how the world is going to be changed. That is how humanity is going to grow and evolve. And if you're not fully convinced that this is how it goes and this is how it works, that is okay. I realize that this is a lot to take in. And this is not how our society runs. This is not how we teach and indoctrinate people. So you can go ahead and decide that later for yourself, that you believe, or just do a little more research, or just lean into trusting yourself. Because in the end, that's the only person really that you're in charge of, is yourself. Man, unscripted and talking for a very long time. I feel like you guys probably have the idea at this point. And I'm really glad that I feel like I was a little tangential, but I really wanted to make sure that you all got the information that you needed out of this podcast today. Because I was feeling a little self-conscious about talking about my process, when really what I wanted to do was inspire you to think differently and to work from your point B, to help you balance your yin and your yang and have the business that you want, so that you have the freedom that you want, so that you have the self-worth that you deserve, so that you can go out there and have abundance and prosperity too. So warriors, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about, just feel free to tag me on Instagram at I am Angela Noel. And if you found some value in this podcast today, I would be ever so grateful if you could write me a review on iTunes, because the more people that write reviews, the more people will learn this information, and this information will get out there, and the more humanity can grow and evolve, and we can all have these lives that we dream of, that we want, because it is possible. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day wherever you're at. Love you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Empowered Warrior podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to have you as a listener. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast and would like to help others pave their pathway to freedom, end their disempowerment and suffering, and become an empowered warrior, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Also, it is my intention to help humanity grow and evolve to their highest potential. So if you really enjoy what you're hearing, please help me spread the word by leaving a review in iTunes. Thank you again, and I am so grateful to be able to serve you in this very exciting way.